Welcome to the Awe and Wonder podcast. I'm Sarah Kinsella,
And I'm Brenda Del Monte.
and we're in Series 9 talking about neurodiversity in education and life. And today we're so excited to be joined by Staci Neustadt. Brenda, can you tell us a little bit about how you know Staci? Because you're the one that got her on this show today, and we're excited to have her.
Yes, shortly after I moved to Arizona, which was like 2014, I was at Peaceful Solutions, which was a school that you were the SLP and maybe the director. I think you were a big deal over there. And you were the SLP, and the most people that went to that school were on the autism spectrum. And at that time, Arizona's so weird. People opt out. They can go to schools they want. They can not go to school at all and get ESA and get tutors, and you can go to schools with autism. Like it's rogue. It's wild, wild west out here. But Staci set up a school that was a beautiful school that met a lot of needs of kids on the spectrum. And so I met her, and it was lovely. And we collaborated on lots of kids using AAC. So she is very familiar with working with children on the autism spectrum that are not functionally verbal. And I know some of our other guests have been working on more high incidence, but I think that Staci has a little bit more to bring for those more complex bodies. So I'm so excited to have you on. Tell everybody that's listening a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it has been quite a few years. I'm Staci. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I have evolved a few different job roles over the past few years since I've been at the school. And my most recent one is joining our founder, Susan Golubach, who is an autistic retired occupational therapist. I joined her at Making Sense of Autism, which is the company that I run now. And what we developed is called the Neuro Strengths-Based Support for Autism framework. Sue was very passionate because being autistic herself and late diagnosed, as well as being an occupational therapist, she saw that need that most therapists weren't providing the support that autistic individuals needed. And she found that most therapists didn't really understand how the autistic brain worked and were reacting to behaviors instead of trying to figure out what was underlying those behaviors. So our work is really built around our core belief. The way that we understand autistic individuals is the thing that has to change before anything else. And when professionals and caregivers shift their lens from what's wrong and how do we fix it to what does this person need and what are they already doing well, it really changes everything. The strategies, the outcomes, the relationships, and that's what we've seen with this framework.
So, is this framework something that's widely available for others to use?
It is. We have a training called Understanding Autistic Strengths and Differences that's available on our website. It's on demand and it's available for therapists, for parents. We actually have a separate version that is for autistic adults. And for that version, it's for lower support needs. So we really recommend if your child is diagnosed level 1 autistic, you could even watch it with them because not only are they learning themselves about what their strengths are, how their brains work, but then you can learn alongside them. And every week, Sue and I put out a little video just to give little bits and pieces of how to start making the shift because it is such a mindset shift from what we were taught in terms of compliance and in terms of a speech pathologist, hey, you have to create these goals based on the deficits that show up in their assessment. So all of those things are available through our website.
So people can watch the videos, and then is there like another tool that they learn how to use, or are the videos the tool themselves?
That is a great question. So the framework is a mindset shift.
Okay.
At the foundation of the framework is really understanding how the autistic brain works and how to understand what the individuals are trying to communicate. So, for example, a lot of the autistic individuals that we work with, self-awareness, body awareness, we may not pick up on those barriers, especially as speech pathologists. But what I've learned is if you miss those barriers, you are going to struggle with functional communication, because if they don't have that self-awareness of what's easy, what's hard, or why am I flopping all over the place because I'm trying to figure out where my body is in space, they cannot focus on language, and they don't have the desire for language because they're just trying to figure out how to be aware of where their body is. And so, really, the framework is the understanding. Some of the tools that we also provide in our training are support tools like problem solving. I know as speech pathologists, we often worked on problem solving, like giving scenarios. Here's the problem. What's your solution? But
Mm-hmm.
that definitely does not help autistic individuals. So the tool that we've developed, that Susan developed based on how her brain works, and it works amazingly. I use it in pretty much every session because there's always a problem. For my kiddos that maybe don't have as strong of language or are higher support needs, it's called trial and error. So it is constantly, uh-oh, we have a problem. Let's think, let's try this. Did it work? Like even today, I was in a session and a kiddo who's a gestalt language processor picks up language through phrases, had this little toy, and I saw him. He's pushing the button, and I could read his nonverbal. He's like, this is not working. So I'm modeling language, not working. Help, mom. And sure enough, he hands it to his mom, and we model more language. And it was, uh-oh, we have a problem. How do we fix it? And so we went through the whole process of opening, let's try batteries. Did that work? And so you think about how much language you can get in that little scenario, as well as how much you're empowering them with those problem solving skills. And so it's little things like that that we don't necessarily think about because we are very focused on receptive and expressive language. But think about how much receptive and expressive language came out of that little scenario where one, he was super intrinsically motivated because he wanted to fix this car. And I want to also point out, before we started implementing some of these strategies like problem solving, that scenario would have created an absolute meltdown
Mm-hmm.
because he picks it up emotionally. He isn't regulated because he's like, oh my gosh, there's a problem, I don't know what to do. But because we've taught him these phrases, because we've taught him, hey, there are solutions, especially when you reach out to other people. Now these scenarios happen, and he uses a lot of nonverbal, but every once in a while he'll say like, fix it, or I need help. So those are emerging too.
You know what I love about that example, first of all, is many people would see that meltdown and go, okay, before I take any toys over there, I got to make sure they're all working, right? We pregame that, and we when
Mm.
we over plan, which is a chronic problem with SLPs, that over plan and over. So we walk in with it's a chronic problem because we walk in with an agenda. And
Mhm.
that's the first problem. The second problem is that we anticipate and don't allow things to not go right. And so we miss the opportunity to problem solve. But I have a lot of kids who are very intrigued in their devices and how does it work and upside down and where's the speaker and how do you plug it in and all the things. I mean, if you were to fix all that, if you were to not allow that level of exploration, then they would be really upset too. So I think it's important to think about, like, you sometimes as therapists, we see a meltdown and we go, I want to do everything I can to not have that happen again. But the reality is it's going to happen. So the real life skill there is when it happens, what do we do?
Exactly. And you think about it, why do we avoid it? Because our nervous system is going to get dysregulated, and then we're
Yeah.
not going to know how to continue with the session. That's how our kids feel every time that happens. And so honestly, I create a problem. And I learned this from Sue. She had a client who she discovered, oh yeah, problem solving is really important. What happened was there was a client who, they're labeled as rigid or inflexible, and they were working on a puzzle or something. Well, the number two was missing. And so she said, uh-oh, we have a problem. Let's see what could be some solutions. We could look for it. We could make a number two. And she realized, okay, this is helping him by creating the solutions, but then even more so, especially if the kids have the capacity for it, talking about what's the consequence of that solution. What happens if we spend the whole session trying to find it? Oh, we might not get to the fun game. What happens if we just make the number two and put it in? then we can play our fun game later. So it's going through that whole process. And it was interesting because she said a couple weeks later, the mom had called her and she's like, I don't know what you're doing in your sessions, but usually every time the schedule changed and we didn't go pick up his sister because she had band after school, he had absolute meltdowns. But this week we didn't go, and I heard him talking in the back seat. We aren't picking up sister because she has band. So he
Mm-hmm.
problem solved. He learned to do it on his own. And that those are those soft skills that we talk about. But again, the biggest barrier is us, because we come in with an agenda to make sure
Mm-hmm.
nothing bad happens. And we don't talk about these things, right? We just quickly fix it. Whereas
Mhm.
with my client today, we literally went through like, oh, it's not working. Let's see. Oh, it has batteries. Let's open it up. Take the batteries out. Look, one, two. We're going to put new batteries in. Did it fix it? Yeah. And so talking through the whole process, and that's usually whether it's as something as simple as fixing batteries or as complicated as body awareness or emotional regulation. Again, we don't talk about that. And that is a barrier that we
Mhm.
are doing almost a disservice for our kids. When I'm working with my kids on body awareness and regulation, like even today, I have a kiddo who loves books. And so every book, we don't even really read it. We look at the pictures and we talk about, it looks like she's kind of upset. Or look, she's upside down. I wonder how that feels on her head. I know when I go upside down, my head feels like it's going to explode because all the blood rushes to it. Those are the kinds of things that we need to start doing, because then it teaches them body awareness, emotional regulation versus just looking at a picture and saying he's happy, he's sad. All these skills are things that it sounds so logical, but
Right.
we don't think of doing it, which is essentially that is what we teach in our framework.
I love that because you're talking about really learning how to problem solve and how to find the language that helps you problem solve. And then rather than just being told, well, this is the script or what you would do in that situation, and this is the only right thing, right? Where, and then also
Mhm.
that there's some autonomy there because maybe as you're going through these options, maybe they came up with something or they say, no, this is the one I really want to do. You try it and you say, well, how did that work? I love that piece of the framework. It kind of reminds me too of, something that we often see in classrooms is like the visual schedule and what is going to happen today. And if something is not there or something changes, that can be really difficult for kids.
It is, but that's also where what do we do as teachers? Oh no, we can't go outside for recess. We're going to just change it and not talk about it. But that is such a missed opportunity. Whereas you could be like, oh, let's look outside. What does it look like outside? Oh, it's raining. Or here in Colorado, it's snowing. We can't go outside. What should we do instead? Let's take this off. Let's make a plan. These are all things that, again, I think we all have such dysregulated nervous systems. We're like, got to get through the plan, got to get through the day. But I find that when adults figure out how to go in, and trust me, sometimes I have to take some deep breaths before I go into a session because I know that I'm going to get dysregulated. But if we stay regulated and take those opportunities to teach our kids, one, we're modeling and co-regulating with them. Oh, look, it's a problem, but we can make another plan and teaching them, hey, what should our plan be? Should we play games in the classroom? Should we see if the gym is open? And these are all, again, like life skills we need to use for the rest of our life.
One thing we're asking everyone is, how you define neurodiversity, and everyone's come up with their own kind of definition, and there's definitely overlap. And there's definitely people who are like, I don't know if everybody's going to like this definition, but, and then people are being brave about how they're really defining this and why we're defining it at all. And so, what is your answer to that question?
I mean, for me, neurodiversity is really recognizing that human brains just naturally vary. They vary in how they process language, they vary in communication, they vary in how they regulate and experience the world. And really, this variation is normal. Um, and it's not pathological, but unfortunately, we have
Mhm.
pathologized it. And I know for me personally, I've realized that I've really been drawn to supporting neurodivergent individuals due to my own neurodivergence. I late self-discovery of anxiety and ADHD. And I can relate to a lot of late diagnosed autistic individuals or other ADHD individuals where I'm like, oh, that explains so much of how my brain works, of even that shame that I feel or felt as a kid of being misunderstood or doing things wrong. And I feel like with neurodiversity, that's unfortunately what happens, especially when it's pathologized.
Mhm.
But making that shift, nobody wants to feel misunderstood. Nobody wants to feel shame over how their brain works. My working memory is horrendous. And so I use a lot of strategies, which a lot of us do. But when, you're shamed on, why don't you remember that? You did this yesterday. Why can't you do this again today? It's a horrible feeling. But what if we said, you were able to do this yesterday. What do you think is different today? And getting
Mhm.
curious because it could have been, oh, I didn't eat breakfast, or I slept awful, or I don't know, I'm really nervous about XYZ. Well, those are the barriers that are getting in the way.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're talking about the more we talk about the problems and the solutions, we're talking out loud. It's not all just living in the teacher's head or the other person's head. I think that's so important. Like you're saying, there are going to be changes to this schedule. There are going to be days when you don't act or do things the way that you did yesterday. And just verbalizing, I wonder what that was. I wonder what that situation was. I wonder what some things that we could do is interesting because it's so simple, right? It's something we can just start doing.
Absolutely. And when it comes to neurodiversity, making these accommodations that some people think, well, I didn't have accommodations when I was a kid. Well, that maybe that's why you struggled. And so making these accommodations for neurodivergent individuals, we find they actually end up happening or helping every kid, not
Mhm.
just the neurodivergent or autistic kiddos.
You mentioned being late diagnosed, and then that you were talking, I think Susan, you said, was also late diagnosed. I've been hearing that more and more as we're talking to people and listening to stories. How did that come about?
My son was identified ADHD, and I was like, holy cow, that is how my brain works.
Mhm.
And I thought, holy cow, that is definitely me. So I haven't ever had the official diagnosis, but different counselors and things I've worked with, like, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And just understanding how your brain works, which I love that more people are talking about this. I was
Mhm.
listening to a podcast that had nothing to do with our field. It had to do with like business or something. But yet they were talking about how people's brains work. And I'm like, I love that this is a discussion because when you understand how your brain works, that's self-awareness. And when you have self-awareness, you can self-advocate. And that's also, part of one of our assessment tools that we have is a soft skills assessment. And we look at where is their self-awareness? Do they have self-awareness? And unfortunately, with autistic individuals, because their sometimes self-awareness or advocacy for themselves is squashed so early because they're told, don't do this, don't do that, which is what Susan went through because she
Mhm.
wasn't identified till 50. She went through that all of her life of stop doing that, stop being that way. So eventually she was a people pleaser and just did whatever people asked them to do. I can definitely relate and understand that because it was like, okay, I'm going to make you happy. And actually, when she was identified at 50, she kind of had a breakdown and went to PTSD, went to a counselor because she was really mad that for so many years she squashed who she was
Mhm.
because that's what people told her to do. And I think a lot of people that are getting identified later, they're feeling that way. But hopefully, as they start to understand themselves and can advocate, hopefully they can advocate for their kids as well. And I mean, you think about how we grew up, like I really believe I was a swimmer from the time I was 6 until senior year. And so, I mean, swim team, you're working out, you're swimming. I really feel like that's how I survived. And that helped my brain the whole time. But you think about it is very different now. Kids have a lot of sitting time. School is different. They make kids sit and learn. I was in a preschool classroom this morning where I'm like, oh my goodness, they're teaching that in preschool. They should just be playing and exploring
Mm.
and not having to sit. So I feel like some of these things are coming out even more so because they aren't moving and challenging their brains in the ways that we had to do that growing up.
I totally agree. My kids played soccer, and my son wore a tracker, and it turns out that he ran an average of 7 miles a game and practices. And by the way, that's sprints, right? This is not get on the track and run 7 miles. This is like 7 miles of short sprints. And it was so regulating for him. But coming back to what you said about listening to the business world, because I love Simon Sinek's and what some of the things that he says. And he was like, some of the most successful people in business are given the freedom to develop and meet deadlines in their way. Like, I
Yeah.
need this done at this time. And I realize that's a demand in and of itself to have a deadline, but the world has deadlines. But I'm not going to micromanage how you do it, when you do it. I want you to manage yourself and create the best work in the way you know how. But our kids, if we give them that much freedom and they're 5 and they don't have any skills, right? Like, we want to be affirming, but what are we affirming if they don't have any skills? Like you're saying, like, I want to show you how to do this so you know how you are successful. So what do you think, neurodiversity affirming looks like, especially for children?
It is modeling and talking about who they are. You're right, absolutely. At 5, they're just exploring the world. So it's
Hmm.
talking a lot about, oh, I see you just threw that toy at your sister. And so that's right, their way of expressing I'm angry and talking about that, like, oh, how did that feel in your body when you obviously something was happening? What did you feel it in your stomach? Did you feel it in your head? And then if they have the terms for emotions, which we know autistic individuals, if you haven't checked out Autism Level Up, I love their resources. If they don't have that emotional vocabulary, you might just talk about, was your brain burning hot and that's why you threw it? And then, what else could you have done in that situation? So I feel like with our younger kids, it's about really just talking more about what we're observing. Because right now, what happens is they throw a toy that wasn't nice. Stop it. That
Discipline.
doesn't
Hmm.
teach them anything. Anything. When I go into daycares, I hear adults constantly yelling at kids. And I'm like, one, that yelling is not creating a safe environment. You're triggering their nervous system so they don't feel safe. And two, what are you teaching them by saying don't bite? You're not teaching anything. And guess what? They're going to keep biting because you're not talking about what's going on, what the situation was. You're not talking about, oh, you wanted that toy. Let's practice. I have it. Those things aren't happening. But if they did, and trust me, when they do, when I teach daycares or I teach families, let's just model over and over at as adults, can I have it? Can I have it? Sure enough, what happens? They do it. Can I have it? And it has to be in that natural context, but it does definitely emerge. And the most important thing too, I know sometimes when people hear about our framework, they're like, "Oh, so you just do whatever they say, and you child led. It's so they can fine throw tantrums. Are you saying?" And it's like,
Mm.
no, it's about partnership because I have a need. I'm the therapist. I'm trying to teach you some of these skills. You have a need. How can we both meet our needs? Which is actually one of our tools that we have is called a working agreement, where we talk about, okay, I'm here to hang out with you or working together. It's my turn, then it's your turn. We agree to share things and work together with whatever we choose to do. If you don't want to do what I choose to do, then you just watch, but you agree to try one time. And if we have a problem, we stop and we solve it together. And if anyone gets mad, we stop until we calm down and we come back and solve that problem. And so I have a visual for it Sometimes they use the visual, again, depending on the kid. Sometimes I just use that structure in taking turns. And it's really, it's so much more than taking turns. It's teaching that partnership. It's teaching that relationship. Because when we go into sessions as therapists, like you said, we've got this agenda, you're going to do this. We are so not teaching relationships. We are teaching, I am the boss. You're going to listen to me because I'm the boss.
Mhm.
And so, how do we expect our kids to pick up on that back and forth, that balanced relationship and that partnership?
Well, and there's two things with that. If they knew how to inhibit all of their reactions, they would.
Yeah,
And if they have learned how to inhibit everything about who they are, did we just create a passive compliant person that is later going to have a breakdown because they are going to realize that they were never their authentic self or allowed to be that person. So
exactly.
first do no harm is real. And in all ways, meaning the boy does not get to continuously throw the car at the sister. The
Yeah.
sister gets to not be harmed.
Mhm.
But we do have to recognize that don't do that doesn't work because they don't have the tools to not do that. They don't know what else to do in their bodies at that moment. If they did, they would make a different choice, or they would show us that they had pause to make a different choice, right? Or there would be something there that would let us know that. I think there is a lot of like, oh, so we just let kids run wild because that's who they are. And it's like, no, no, I love the idea of making that mutual agreement.
Yeah, and I know that that's sometimes the tension, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
but that's not how I was taught. But I can, and it feels so much better. And
Yeah.
this is why we talk about our framework is truly a mindset shift to just stop and get curious. I mean, some sessions I can literally go in with absolutely nothing, and I just watch and observe and get curious. Okay, what are they exploring today? What are they interested in today? And it could just be maybe they're just completely dysregulated and we just have to sit in silence. And I can just say, hey, it's okay. Like one of my clients, when I walk in, I don't even say hi, I do a check in, thumbs
Thumbs
up,
up.
thumbs down, as in
Mhm.
like, you ready to start or not ready? And when I first started with him, he was a no kid. So he would just shout no at me because I was a new person. And I'm like, cool, that's okay. I get it. We built up safety, we built up that rapport. So now when I come in, sometimes he's in the middle of a gestalt or he's in the middle of a movie and he'll go, not yet, not yet. And I always know, even when I sometimes I'll say, can I play? Can I join in? Sometimes he'll let me and then he'll look at me, he'll go, not yet because he's got like his thought that he wants to finish. And so but it is still like you don't have to have this strict agenda. But I realize not everyone's brain works that way, right? Like not everyone can think on the fly. And so for therapists that are thinking, well, I can't not come in with anything because maybe they feel safe with predictability, which some that's how the autistic brain works too. You can still create some predictability by bringing in things that are enticing that they may enjoy, especially like cause and effect. So many of my kids love anything that's cause and effect. Like I used cotton balls today, and it was literally a full session of just cotton balls. We were blowing them, we were pulling them, all kinds of sensory experiences.
You mentioned Autism Level Up. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm not familiar.
Yeah, so it is two psychologists. One psychologist is autistic, and they share a really interesting story about how emotion vocabulary didn't resonate with them. And so they came up with energy levels. And so on their website, they have a lot of different. I was looking to see if I have the visual supports all over my office, but they have different energy levels with different images of special interests. So, like one I used today was cars. So, like Mater is really slow, and it's talking about like where individuals' energy is, and then where it needs to be for the situation. So, like, our energy level might be really high and we're out on recess. So that matches. Our energy level is high at recess. But maybe our energy level is really high and it's circle time right now. And so talking about, okay, like, whoa, our energy is really high. Let's see how we could bring our energy down.
Hmm.
And for one of my kiddos that, again, where body awareness and body regulation is a big barrier. he loves input to the muscles and the joints is really regulating. So he loves it when I just kind of pick him up by his arms and he just kind of hangs. And you can see as soon as he goes down, he's like, like it's just very regulating. So you
Mhm.
can see, I mean, we have to incorporate OT stuff, just like OTs
Mhm.
incorporate AC devices and speech
Mhm.
stuff. Like we have to really work together
Mhm.
to get anywhere with some of our kids.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, giving them some of that vocabulary, right? To know that when you're hanging or whatever that feeling is, and this is how your body feels, and it's a good feeling, or and not just I'm good, I'm bad, I'm happy, I'm
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
It reminds me of an OT I worked with once that was talking to a student about, they had stomach aches, and I think, parents always want their kids to communicate more about how they're feeling and how their body is feeling, and we do too, but we don't always give them that vocabulary. And so she was saying, sometimes their stomach ache is because you're feeling like nervous, you're having a big feeling. Sometimes it's constipation. Sometimes you are sick, you might have the flu. And it was the first time, and she had some visuals for that. And he was learning that over time. It was the first time he really knew, like, oh, this stomach ache isn't just same old stomach ache, right? And obviously it helps families. But I just love the idea of in your framework too, just giving kids more vocabulary to explain, describe, and problem solve what's going on with their own body too.
Yeah, and it takes us getting curious first and sitting back. And that's where I feel like, the biggest shift that I've seen in myself is, especially when I observe quote unquote behaviors, I see it as, okay, there's a need that's not been met. And so what need is it they're trying to communicate? It's too loud. I need something to help me regulate. And so if we get the knowledge that we need in order to understand what are they trying to communicate to us, then we can offer those supports. And what's really cool is what I find, I mean, I would say probably 99% of the time, when I offer something, even for non-speaking individuals, when I offer something and I'm right, their eyes light up or they echo it. But if I offer something and I'm not right, it's just silence or no response. So when you've hit it and you sit back and you get curious and then you offer some ideas. Do you need squishes? Do you need vest? Do you need quiet? They do respond to
Hmm.
yes and no. You can't ask that open-ended, what do you need? Because that's not going to get anywhere.
Well, not all of us can, not very many of us can answer that question in general. What
Yeah.
do you need?
Yeah.
I think that would stump just about anybody right about now.
Oh,
But
for sure.
I was doing a consult recently with a classroom that had, I think, 14 kids. Most of them were level 3 autism, teacher, two paras, and one is flapping, and that triggers the other one screaming, and the screaming triggers the other one's, elopement. And so I hear, I know what a therapy session can look like with a lot less distraction. But how do you use all these strategies in a classroom setting?
I love that you use that example because I was in one very similar to that. Stop, stop. And the teacher needs to model, whoa, it's loud. What's going to help us in this moment? Let's turn off the lights. Does that help? Let's, if there's some aids in there, who wants some squeezes? Who wants to go in the quiet corner? And name it, right? Like these kids are all very dysregulated and dysregulating each other. So no
Mhm.
learning is going to take place. But how much
Exactly.
learning is going to happen when an adult says, whoa, this room is, the Lightning McQueen and it's Speedy or whatever. There's another science one that I love where it's an exploding Coke bottle. I love that one.
Mhm.
So this teacher could be like, whoa, the classroom's up here. It's like an exploding Coke bottle. We need to come back down here like the melting ice. What's going to help us get there? Let's turn off the lights. And, just kind of starting from there, let's all talk really quiet. Maybe we just need to take a break because you're teaching the language of lights off, need squeezes, need a break, need quiet. You're teaching them regulation. Oh, how does that feel now that we turn the lights off and nobody's screaming and it's quiet? does that feel good? I mean, there is so much in that moment. But again, teachers are like, nope, gotta teach, gotta keep going. But um, there's Lori Dustals. I always pronounce her name incorrectly, but she teaches kids about their nervous system. And obviously, these are kids, probably, I'm sure neurodivergent kids, but these are kids who can process the language. But she teaches them about their nervous system. And what she's discovered is they start talking about it, and they are able to talk about their nervous system, how they're feeling. This is that same idea. I don't
Mhm.
care where you think the autistic individual is at. When you model this stuff consistently, a strength of autistic individuals is they pick up on pattern. So if every time the classroom gets loud, the teacher says, whoa, we're an exploding Coke bottle. Let's turn off the lights so we can melt like ice. They're going to be like, oh, maybe they'll start saying Coke bottle or melt ice or whatever the teacher decides to use, which is going to be great advocacy. And
Mhm.
oh, yeah, we get back to here. Okay, now we're ready to learn.
Well,
Mhm.
and what you're saying is also that you're modeling it, but you're also practicing it in that moment. Because I know a lot of times we'll say, well, they have the sensory choices in their iPad, like there's a whole page for it, but they're not doing it, right? But
Mhm.
if you're not practicing it and talking about it, like you're saying, why would they know how to use that page, right?
Mhm.
Exactly. And if their
Mhm.
nervous system isn't, they can't access it. They're already in fight or flight. We know the language center shuts down. So we can't, that that is the number one thing I hear. Well, I want them to communicate when they're mad, what they're mad about. And I'm like, well, think about it. When you're mad, are you good at communicating or do you start yelling? So
Mhm.
really even educating the adults and the parents on like, okay, when we're dysregulated, our communication system is, how many times do we say things and we're like, oops, shouldn't have said that. It's because our language or
Mhm.
kids literally stop talking because their language center has shut down.
Mhm.
Well, and when families say I want them to tell me when they're mad, I've said, you can't tell? I mean,
Yeah.
they actually are telling you they're mad.
Exactly.
Every part of their body is telling you that they're mad. So that's not actually what you want to know. What
Yeah.
you want to know is how can I get you not mad?
Yes.
And they don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
So, what are the things you can do? There's a book called Little Penguin Gets the Hiccup, and I read it, and there's like literally you have to kind of read it with animation. But one of the strategies is like, oh, somebody tells me to stand on my head, and so when I read that book with children with autism, we say, what does upside down feel like? And is that a thumbs up or is that a thumbs down thing, right? Then there's being scared. There's that, and then we let them add their own. What about the swing? What about hanging? Because then it was like, does that bring your hiccup down? Right? It's kind of its own little analogy. Like it feels like it's out of control. You can't stop it. And the book walks through all the kinds of weird, rub your tummy, pat your head, drink water upside down. But you can make up your own too. And then kids come up with their own kind of regulating things like, did that stop the hiccups? And I think that there's books that can talk about ways that that other characters, right? They have that like a little bit removing themselves from the story. They can think a little bit more objectively about like, oh, what did that character do? This story is not about a child with autism or about this
Right.
solution, but you stop in that moment and go, what did they do? What are the things that they tried? Look at their persistence, and you kind of highlight the problem solving of all of that.
And it's books like that, you think about, I forget who started this or whatever, but if you say, don't think about the big purple elephant, what do? You think about the big purple
Mhm.
elephant, which
Mhm.
is exactly how we teach soft skills. So that book you're talking about,
Mhm.
we don't have to, you're not teaching it explicitly per se, you're modeling it, you're talking about it.
Yeah.
That's how we all learn, is through
Yeah.
talking about it over and over again. That's why autistic individuals, they're, some people call it perseveration, but really they're learning. If they want to read
Mhm.
that book 20 times, it's because they're learning each part of that and then processing it and understanding it.
I like what you said though about the adults need to be kind of in agreement about consistently prompting around this. I don't even know if I like the word prompt, but cueing or I wonder, statements like having
Yeah.
the same statements because they are looking for those patterns.
Yes.
And when the adults around them are using the same vocabulary, that's actually pretty regulating all by itself.
Oh, it totally is. Some of the phrases that I use are like, I wonder if, and then with parents too, to start getting them to notice. Oftentimes, when we talk at the end of the session, or I mean, they're always with me, but I
Mhm.
usually don't talk about it till the end. I'll say, Oh, I noticed. Did you notice? Because then it gets them to start noticing, because that's what
Mhm.
it is. It's about getting curious, it's about
Mhm.
noticing,
Mhm.
especially with meltdowns. Like you talk about the kid who's angry. Well, what did you notice? What were some of the signs right before that? Oh, he was
Mhm.
pacing. Ah, so that's when you start to go in. Hey, I noticed you're pacing. Sometimes when you pace, that makes me think that your body might feel dysregulated or you might need some big squeezes. Am I
Mhm.
right? If
Mhm.
we start to head it off there, again, we're modeling the language that they can start being self-aware. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
whenever I pace, I am dysregulated. I
Mhm.
should go get my heavy blanket. So we're teaching all these really good skills. So part of the point of all of this is so then they can start learning other things.
Yes.
And but we're like up here trying to teach ABCs, trying to teach reading, trying to teach all that stuff, but they don't even have what's at the foundation,
Yeah.
that self-awareness, that self-advocacy.
They're not their body's not at a learning level.
Not at
Yeah.
all.
It's a
And
it's a bit of a fight or flight moment there.
mhm.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes that can be really hard to do those things in the moment. Like we talked about the classroom that's busy and there's so many things going on. Or the parent, you're trying to make dinner and you have two other kids, and then you may not catch that your kid is pacing, right? Or that can take some practice to get in there and say, oh, I got to get in there before. And so I know I have to like print things in my own house or when I'm working, like print phrases or things that I'm going to try to remember to say, rephrasing words. Do you have any resources for that? Is that part of your framework? Like just some handout kind of things with here is some of those things to say?
Yeah, actually, one of our free handouts we have is What Am I Saying? It's helping therapists and parents interpret what is the individual saying with their nonverbal communication. Another tool that we talk about in our framework, which we have researched this framework. We use 16 OTs and SLPs, and they all 100% were like, yes. I would recommend this kind of training because it helped me understand the autistic brain. And one of the tools that we use is actually feed forward feedback. And I know as an ADHD person, like we are in the moment and just get what's done. We don't necessarily think about the future. We don't necessarily think about the past. We are like right here, right now. And so for me, this is still a big barrier for me. But when I remember, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is such a great tool. When we feed forward, almost you like plan out for the session, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to make sure I say these things. I notice, or I wonder, and just kind of plan for that and then feedback. Oh, remember how you were doing this today? And I was really curious. And I wondered if you were doing that. You were trying to tell me that. And think about like really that's getting repetition in of feedback of what we did and what we learned in the session. And so that idea of feed forward kind of planning, but planning with our kids, not for our kids and feedback, it really is a good tool that we can incorporate into any session and teach parents to do.
I love that. We'll link all of your information to this podcast. And I love the feedback part because sometimes I feel like that's often a missing loop, but that can be so important for that teaching piece of it. A lot of times we're like, I just want to move forward and forget that all happened.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't, and I think we've mentioned this before, but it's just kind of a big shift in the way that even we're taught as therapists or as parents. And maybe it's becoming less like that, but it's more having those conversations and having that the relationship and establishing that relationship, which seems like a huge part of what you are doing.
I think a lot of times we solve autistic behaviors with isolation. So we put them in the sensory room, we put them in the room that has five adults and two kids. We kind of it is not the least restrictive environment. And we isolate them, and they don't even have the opportunity then to build friendships and make connections. And we kind of do it. We don't realize maybe that that is not teaching them anything. It's just teaching them isolation. And I know that if the only way for a child to regulate is to spend an hour in the sensory room by themselves, what happens when you're in Target? I mean, and most of life does not happen at home in the sensory room. And if it does, then you're really limiting life, right? And
Mhm.
some people choose like they don't know another way, so we don't really leave the house. Or we I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that when I do a lot of communication device evaluations in the home, and as the child is older and more physical, I think people are fearful then to incorporate them. And it's like, I love that you work with, preschool birth to three, like the younger population, because I think building the skills when they're younger helps them be able to participate in regular classrooms and general education and be included socially when they want to be, right? When
Yeah.
it's helpful for them. Because I think that isolation piece is really pretty dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. And think about it. If you don't have those opportunities to learn about the world, to learn about how do I regulate around these other people,
Mhm.
then you aren't gaining that
Don't get good
self-awareness.
at it.
You
Yeah.
don't. And I know the when I work with families of younger kids, I do frequently hear, I'm just worried he's going to be aggressive when he's older.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years and I've seen kids that
Mhm.
started really young and now they're in their 20s. And I can say that when the people around that child accept that child for who they are, don't try to squash their stimming because they're regulating, don't try to squash their special interest because it's their favorite thing, don't try to squash who they are. They grow up to be pretty happy adults. The
Mhm.
kids that end up with more aggression, I mean, this is obviously not a blanket statement, but I have worked with kids where I've seen they were in very compliance environments and it was constantly squashed. Well, who isn't going to be mad if you can't be your authentic self?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it feels easier to do that sometimes as the adult, right? That the compliance, but you're not teaching them those skills that you had talked about and the problem solving and the language and modeling in the real situation and practice. So thank you for bringing that up. Before we wrap up, we wanted to ask you if you could plant one idea in every listener's mind about neurodiversity, what would it be?
Really think the difficulty is not the same as the disorder or the diagnosis. People often will say, oh, it's because they're autistic. That is not true. When an autistic person is struggling, the environment, the expectation, or the lack of the right support is almost always part of that story and is usually most of it. So when you stop asking, what's wrong with this person? Why are they doing this? And blaming it on their diagnosis and start asking, what does this person need that they're not getting right now? Whether it's feeling safe, whether it's feeling like this expectation is too big. I need your help. Whether it's, I can't do this today because I'm dysregulated. Can you help me regulate? That's really the moment that real support becomes possible. So shifting from that, blaming it on the diagnosis or fixing it to asking, what can I do to support?
I love that. That the child is not the problem, right? We need to look
Yeah.
at what needs to be changed. I love that, Staci. Thank you so much for joining us. We've come away with so many great ideas and your framework for working with people with autism and being helping support autonomy and just all these ideas you've come up with are fantastic. And we're going to be so excited to dig into that a little bit more.
And I think you broke down the tools in manageable steps
Mm-hmm.
and memorable phrases for people to for it to land for people.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is produced by the Special Education Technology Center, administered by Central Washington University, and funded in part by OSPI. However, the content does not necessarily represent the policy of CWU and OSPI, and you should not assume endorsement by the state government.